Tonight, we're going to glide down, through the silent, crushing layers of our planet's vast, blue heart. We'll explore where the familiar world ends and where truly ancient, truly bizarre life forms begin. These are creatures that have crafted their existence in ways we can barely imagine, thriving in environments that would instantly end us. They've mastered the art of survival in the perpetual night, often using light that they themselves create. We're talking about hunters from a time before the age of dinosaurs, beings that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless species, remaining the quiet masters of their endless, sunless domain. We'll uncover what these deep dwellers can tell us about life's very beginnings and consider if even greater mysteries, perhaps even larger, still unknown beings, might be lurking in the ocean's deepest trenches. We'll even ponder what would happen if we tried to bring one of these incredible beings up to our bright, fragile surface world. Thanks to amazing modern submersibles and some groundbreaking new fossil finds, we can embark on this journey together, seeking out these answers. Honestly, if you found yourself down there without our advanced equipment, you wouldn't survive a single moment to even comprehend your mistake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is for you. Imagine you're just floating. This is the ocean we all think we know. You're bobbing right there, on the very top of the water, and it feels wonderfully warm against your skin. The sun shines brightly above, painting the world in a vibrant, energetic blue. This upper layer, this dazzling, sun-drenched space, is called the epipelagic zone, or simply, the sunlit zone. It's a surprisingly thin band of water, only reaching down to about 200 meters, or roughly 650 feet below the surface. When you consider the ocean's total volume, this zone is an incredibly tiny, almost insignificant fraction of it all. Yet, almost everything you picture when you think of ocean life, nearly all the activity, happens right here. A staggering 90% of all marine creatures on our planet are packed into this narrow, warm, aquatic ceiling. You'd see schools of tuna, flashing silver as they dart past like living projectiles. You might spot the elegant, familiar form of a sea turtle, gliding effortlessly. Perhaps even the tell-tale dorsal fin of a shark, patrolling the edges of this bustling domain. It's a busy, lively, thriving metropolis beneath the waves. And its entire existence, from the smallest organism to the largest inhabitant, relies on one fundamental thing: the sun. This whole intricate ecosystem, from the most microscopic shrimp to the immense blue whale, stands upon a foundation of what you could call underwater grass. These are phytoplankton. They're tiny, single-celled photosynthetic algae, and they represent the true powerhouse of our planet. They absorb the sun's energy, drawing in carbon dioxide from the water, and in doing so, they form the absolute bedrock of the entire marine food web. Every other creature in this vast environment either consumes phytoplankton directly or eats something that has, in turn, consumed phytoplankton. This vital layer also serves as, quite literally, Earth's second set of lungs. It's estimated that these minuscule, drifting plants create over half of the oxygen you're breathing right now, no matter where you are on Earth. That breath you just took, a huge portion of it came from these tiny ocean dwellers. The scientific understanding of this zone's lower boundary is quite straightforward. Photosynthesis, the process that powers these plants, has its limitations. As light penetrates water, it gets absorbed. The warmer, higher energy wavelengths, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, are the first to vanish. They're soaked up within just the first few dozen feet of descent. As you continue to sink, the world gradually loses its warmth and vibrant color, until only the cool, deep blue light can still pierce the depths. By the time you reach that 200-meter mark, there just isn't enough solar energy remaining for any plant life to thrive. Ancient seafarers understood this sunlit zone intimately. The incredible Polynesian navigators, for instance, became masters at interpreting its subtle cues. They could traverse thousands of miles of open ocean by recognizing slight changes in currents. They also paid close attention to the water's color. A sterile, deep blue hue often indicated a marine desert, a place with little life. But a slightly greener, murkier tint. That signaled a blooming abundance of phytoplankton, and by extension, the fish that fed upon them. They were, in essence, reading the sea's grass to guide their epic voyages. And that distinctive, tangy scent of the sea you experience at the beach. That's not actually the smell of salt water. It's the aroma of a chemical compound called dimethyl sulfide. This compound is released by phytoplankton when they die or when they are consumed by other organisms. So, when you smell the ocean, you are quite literally smelling the exhalation of this immense, microscopic garden that spans the globe. It's a slightly peculiar, but entirely true, little piece of information. However, this vibrant, sun-kissed city has a distinct, impenetrable floor. As you continue your gentle drift past the 100-meter mark, the sunlight noticeably begins to dim. The warmth completely disappears, and the pressure, that subtle, growing weight, starts to build around you. At 200 meters, you find yourself at the very edge of a precipice. Below you, there's nothing but a vast, seemingly empty, black void. Now, that 200-meter line isn't an absolute, unyielding rule. Oceanographers still debate whether this boundary should be defined by the available light, the water temperature, or even its density. In reality, it's a blurry, shifting border that moves with the seasons and the powerful currents. But for our journey, for this descent, it represents a very real, unyielding frontier. We are leaving this world of light and color behind us. We are going to let go, and we're going to sink. And we're not going to stop. You're now descending. You've just passed the 200-meter mark, and the shift is far from subtle. It's immediate, almost shocking. The first thing you experience is the sudden, profound cold. The gentle, almost bath-like warmth of the upper sunlit zone is instantly gone. It feels as though you've passed through an invisible, physical barrier. And in a way, you have. You've just crossed the thermocline. This is a critical boundary layer that separates the warm, mixed surface waters from the immense, freezing deep waters below. It's a permanent, global feature, a liquid floor that the sun's warmth can never penetrate. The temperature has just plummeted by 10 or 15 degrees Celsius in a matter of seconds. The second sensation you notice is the intensifying pressure. In the world above, on the surface, you are experiencing 1 atmosphere of pressure, or 1 atm. That's the normal, comfortable weight of the air pushing down on you, something you don't even perceive. Here, at just over 200 meters, you are already feeling 20 atmospheres of pressure. It's the immense weight of 200 meters of water pressing down on you, in addition to the air above. It creates an alien, crushing sensation. If you still possessed your ears in this thought experiment, they would have ruptured instantly. The air within your lungs would be squeezed to a mere 20th of its original volume. This isn't a gentle squeeze. It's like having a full, grown person standing on every single square centimeter of your body, all at once. There's a very good reason why this depth marks the absolute hard limit for recreational scuba divers. Our bodies are, essentially, bags of water, and water itself doesn't compress easily. But our lungs, those air-filled pockets, are our critical vulnerability. They represent our fatal flaw in this environment. The development of the self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, or SUBA, by Jacques Cousteau and Emile Gagnon, gave us the illusion of limitless underwater exploration. But it only ever truly opened a tiny keyhole. It allowed us to visit the very porch of the ocean, but it could never truly let us inside its inner chambers. Our air-filled, compressible bodies are simply a liability down here. The third change you observe is the color. Remember how those warm light frequencies, the reds and oranges, were absorbed first. Down here, they've completely vanished. If you were to cut your hand in this environment, your blood wouldn't appear red. It would look a sickly, dark blue, black. There's simply no red light left to reflect back to your eyes. The entire world is now a deep, monochromatic twilight blue. It's a beautiful sight, yes, but it possesses the cold, sterile beauty of a distant, dying star. You continue your descent, sinking past 300 meters, then 400 meters. The pressure builds with every single foot, relentlessly. 30 atmospheres. 40 atmospheres. The blue light itself is now fading, growing dimmer as the immense column of water above you becomes too thick for even those most persistent frequencies to pass through. This sudden change in temperature and density at the thermocline isn't just a fascinating scientific curiosity. It historically served as a critical, strategic battlefield. During World War II, submarines skillfully utilized the thermocline as a perfect hiding spot. This dense layer of cold water was so significantly different from the warmer water above it that it could actually bend and distort enemy sonar pings, much like a mirage distorts light in a scorching desert. A submarine could dive just beneath this layer and, for all practical purposes, become invisible to the hunters on the surface. The sheer pressure is the true monster here. The scientific explanation for why we cannot exist in these depths is a fundamental high school physics lesson, Boyle's law. It states that the volume of a gas is inversely proportional to its pressure. As pressure doubles, the volume of a gas is halved. As pressure increases 40-fold, well, you can easily imagine the consequences for any creature possessing a gas-filled space. A normal fish, for example, uses a swim bladder, an air-filled sac, to maintain buoyancy. In these conditions, such a bladder would be crushed flat, its internal organs imploding. Life down here absolutely cannot contain air pockets. It must be composed of solid, gelatinous, or water-filled tissue. It has to be as incompressible as the water surrounding it. This, of course, brings up one of the great, ongoing scholarly debates in marine biology. How on earth do deep, diving mammals, like the magnificent sperm whales, manage it? They are, after all, air breathers just like us. We know that they exhale before undertaking a deep dive, and their rib cages are incredibly designed to collapse their lungs, squeezing out almost all the air. This prevents their lungs from rupturing and, as an added benefit, likely stops nitrogen from dissolving into their blood at high pressure, which is what causes the bends in human divers. But the full extent of their physiological mastery, the precise molecular level adaptations that allow them to dive a mile down and return to the surface without suffering a complete systemic failure, remains a profound mystery. You're now sinking past 500 meters. The last, faintest glimmer of twilight blue is now indistinguishable from the pervasive blackness. You are entering a truly new world. The real adventure truly begins here. We are now officially within the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone. This is the vast oceanic middle ground, extending from that 200-meter floor all the way down to 1,000 meters, or about 300 feet. And twilight is the perfect description for it. The last struggling remnants of sunlight manage to reach here, but it's less than 1% of what hits the surface. It's no longer true light. It's more of an ambience. It's a perpetual, deep, starless twilight. A bruised, purplish, black hue that is just barely distinguishable from absolute darkness. It's like experiencing the world through a million tons of blue, tinted sunglasses. And critically, this extremely dim glow is far too weak for photosynthesis to occur. The plant life is completely gone. The phytoplankton, that grass of the sea that sustained the entire sunlit zone, cannot grow here. From this point onward, there is no primary production in the way we typically understand it. No new food is being created in this realm. So, what does everything here consume? It's a simple, brutal economy based on two primary factors. First, these creatures eat each other. This is a world of pure, unadulterated hunters, where efficiency is key. Second, they consume the food that drifts down from the brighter world above, the mere leftovers from the chaotic, sun-drenched party in the epipelagic zone. However, there's a third, even more astonishing option. Rather than passively waiting for food to fall, this entire ecosystem actually ascends to retrieve it. This region is home to the Deep Scattering Layer, or DSL, and it represents the single largest animal migration on our planet. It unfolds every single night. This phenomenon isn't a recent discovery. For a historical example, consider the 1930s. The pioneering explorer William Beebe descended into this very zone in a tiny metal sphere he called a bathysphere. When he peered out the porthole, he became the first human to ever witness this realm. He had anticipated a barren, empty void. Instead, he reported seeing a black, star-studded sky filled with living lights, a blizzard of unknown creatures so dense that he could barely see beyond them. He was, effectively, floating in the very middle of the DSL. However, the true nature of this layer was scientifically confirmed during World War II. Sonar operators on warships were receiving baffling, even terrifying readings. Their screens displayed a phantom bottom, a seemingly solid seafloor hovering at 300 to 500 meters during the day. But at night, this false bottom would mysteriously rise toward the surface, and the actual seafloor would become visible again. This wasn't a geological anomaly. It wasn't an enemy trick. It was life. That phantom bottom was a dense, miles-thick layer composed of trillions of animals, lanternfish, bristlemouths, glowing squid, and countless crustaceans. The sonar waves were simply bouncing off their collective bodies. Every single dusk, this entire ecosystem, this massive living layer of the ocean, begins a vertical commute. They swim hundreds, even thousands of feet straight up into the sunlit zone, which by then is dark and safe. They spend the entire night frantically feeding on the rich buffet of phytoplankton and the smaller creatures that consume them. Then, at the very first hint of dawn, they flee. They race against the rising sun, plunging back down into the twilight zone, returning to the crushing pressure and the cold, hiding from the fast. Visually oriented predators of the daytime world, such as tuna and sharks. To help put this into perspective, here's a curious fact. The combined biomass of the creatures within the deep scattering layer is estimated to exceed 10 billion tons. It's not merely a food source, it is the food source. It likely outweighs every other animal on the planet. All the insects, all the cattle, all the whales, all of humanity combined. This is the throbbing, pulsating heart of the ocean's economy. And it is a world intricately built upon light. Not the sun's light, but light that these creatures themselves generate. This is the true domain of bioluminescence. With no sun to guide them, life in this zone had to invent its own illumination. Creatures here use chemical light for every conceivable purpose, glowing lures to attract unsuspecting prey, sudden bright flashes to startle and disorient predators, patterned running lights to locate a mate in the vast darkness, and even glowing bellies to illuminate themselves, precisely matching the faint twilight from above to make them invisible to hunters lurking below. Scholars still debate the primary evolutionary driver for this incredible adaptation. Did bioluminescence first evolve as a lure? Or was it initially a cry for help, a kind of burglar alarm that would light up a predator, thereby attracting an even larger predator to come and inadvertently save the smaller creature? Or was it, as many scientists now suspect, first a form of camouflage? The answer is likely all of the above, a continuous evolutionary arms race playing out in cold, living light. You continue your descent. You pass 800 meters. Then 900. The last ghostly hint of the twilight is now completely gone. You have reached the 1,000 meter mark. The very last photon of sunlight has been extinguished. You are now in the true, eternal, and absolute dark. You have left behind the final trace of the sun's reach. You are now sinking through the bathypelagic zone, often called the midnight zone, which extends from 1,000 meters down to a staggering 4,000 meters. That's from about 300 feet down to over 13,000 feet below the surface. The environment here is no longer subject to rapid change. It is stable. It is eternally stable. The water temperature is now a constant, near freezing 2 to 4 degrees Celsius or 35 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. It will not fluctuate. Not for 1,000 years, not in summer, not in winter. The pressure is now absolutely astronomical. You're passing 100 atmospheres, then 150 atmospheres. It's a weight that is almost impossible to truly imagine. Like having a main battle tank parked squarely on your thumbnail, and it just keeps building. And the light. There is none, ever. The very concepts of day and night are utterly meaningless here. The only lights you will ever witness are those created by the creatures themselves. The cold, chemical flashes of bioluminescence, brief sparks of life in an infinite, crushing black. Life here is incredibly sparse. The great deep scattering layer, that vibrant, migrating mass of life, does not venture this far down. The commute is simply too long, and the pressure is far too extreme. This zone is a desert. The vast majority of the water here is just empty, silent space. So, with such emptiness, what is there to consume in this deep, dark desert? You gaze upwards, and in the faint, almost imaginary light of our journey, you perceive it. A constant, gentle, almost invisible rain. This is marine snow. This snow isn't frozen precipitation at all. It's a never-ending blizzard of detritus. These are the leftovers from the vibrant, chaotic party that takes place in the sunlit zone thousands of feet above. It's comprised of whatever sinks, tiny fecal pellets from zooplankton, fragments of dead algae, the ghostly, disintegrating bells of jellyfish, particles of dust, and the occasional fish scale. This is it. This is the only consistent food source for most of the life on this part of the planet. The entire abyssal ecosystem operates on these mere crumbs from the table above. It's a low-energy, low-nutrition diet of waste. We understand this thanks to the scientific evidence gathered from specialized sediment traps. These are, quite literally, giant, high-tech funnels that oceanographers deploy on the seafloor for months at a time. They sit there in the profound darkness, patiently collecting all the snow that falls into them. When they are eventually retrieved, their contents are meticulously analyzed. This is how we measure the carbon pump, the vital process by which the surface ocean sequesters carbon into the deep, and in doing so, sustains an entire hidden world. This scarce, low-energy food source dictates a very specific lifestyle for the creatures that call this zone home. Life here must be incredibly efficient. You simply cannot afford to waste any energy. This leads to a common body plan among many deep sea organisms. Slow metabolisms that burn almost no calories, and gelatinous, watery bodies that are neutrally buoyant, allowing them to float with virtually zero effort. They are masters of waiting, the ultimate models of energy conservation. You continue your descent, passing 3,000 meters. You glide past the resting place of the RMS Titanic. This is its eternal home, lying at 800 meters, just on the cusp of the next great oceanic zone. This is a well-known historical fact. The Titanic rests in an environment that has preserved it in a way the surface world never could. The intense cold dramatically slows decay. The complete absence of light prevents algae from growing, and the pressure is so immense that most of the organisms that would typically devour wood simply cannot exist here. It's an icy, high-pressure museum, a silent testament to a bygone era. As you pass 4,000 meters, approximately 13,123 feet, you have officially entered the abyssopelagic zone, or simply the abyss. This is the region of the vast, flat, muddy plains that cover the majority of Earth's surface. The pressure here now exceeds 400 atmospheres, equating to over 800 pounds per square inch. Here's a curious demonstration that underwater explorers love to perform. If you attach a regular styrofoam cup, full of air, to the outside of a submersible descending to these depths, it will return to the surface shrunken to the size of a thimble. The extreme pressure squeezes every last molecule of air out, perfectly and permanently crushing it. You are now cruising over the bottom of the world. It's a seemingly endless expanse of cold, dark mud. For decades, it was widely assumed that this mud was completely devoid of life. However, this has led to one of the significant ongoing scholarly debates of our time: just how much life truly exists within this vast muddy realm. We now understand that this sediment is teeming with a deep biosphere. Trillions upon trillions of microbes, bacteria, and archaea are living within the mud, slowly digesting the ons of marine snow that have accumulated. Some scientists have suggested that this hidden, subterranean kingdom of microbes, by its sheer mass, might represent one of the largest biomes on Earth. This world moves at an incredibly slow pace. The marine snow falls gently. The microbes slowly consume it. Nothing unfolds quickly here. But sometimes something truly significant does happen. Sometimes a true jackpot arrives, a food fall that delivers more nutrition than 2,000 years of regular marine snow combined. A single, massive, nutrient-dense prize that sinks from the surface world. This is a whale fall. We will return to this extraordinary event. For now, understand that you are in the deepest, darkest, slowest part of our modern world. Yet, this wasn't always just the bottom. Once, a very, very long time ago, this deep, dark abyss was the only world. Now, let's rewind time. You are still floating in the abyss, but the timeline, the very fabric of history, is unwinding rapidly around you. The whale fall is gone. The Titanic is gone. The continents far above you are shifting, reforming into unrecognizable, alien shapes. You are rewinding past the era of the dinosaurs, past the catastrophic, great dying, extinction event, past the entire age of fish. You are traveling back 600 million years. You are in the Ediacaran period, the boring billion, a vast stretch of evolutionary time where the only life on Earth was a thin, slimy mat of single-celled bacteria, has finally just concluded. The planet's oceans, which had remained silent and largely barren for nearly 4 billion years, are suddenly home to the first large, complex life forms. This is the Ediacaran biota, and you are now floating directly amongst them. But they are profoundly unlike any life we recognize today. Look around you. There are no fish, no crabs, no familiar creatures of any kind. The very concepts of swimming, or hunting, or even thinking do not yet exist. Instead, the seafloor is covered in strange things. Bizarre, quilted mattress-like forms lie flat upon the mud. Odd segmented discs are scattered around, resembling alien hubcaps. And rising from the deep seafloor, in the absolute total 4,000-meter deep darkness, are feathers. You are floating through a silent, pitch-black forest of 6-foot-tall, fractal feathers. This is Charnia, the creature often highlighted in discussions of this period. It stands upright, firmly rooted in the mud, swaying gently in a current that has remained largely unchanged for 1,000 years. It is not a plant, we know this with certainty. This is a key piece of scientific evidence. Charnia fossils are discovered worldwide, perfectly preserved in beds of volcanic ash. Crucially, these ash beds are found in locations that were once the deep, abyssal ocean, thousands of feet down, far, far below the sunlit zone. Photosynthesis would have been physically impossible in such an environment. This creature was an animal, living its entire existence in total, crushing darkness. But observe it more closely. It possesses no mouth. It has no gut. It has no stomach. It lacks nerves, muscles, and even a brain. It is simply a complex, patterned, living shape. So, how did it obtain nourishment? It didn't eat, in the conventional sense. It simply absorbed. It's believed that Charnia lived by osmotrophy, passively soaking up dissolved carbon and other essential nutrients directly from the surrounding seawater. It was, in effect, a filter feeder of chemicals. This represents life before the concept of predation truly emerged. This was the Garden of Ediacara. Nothing possessed teeth. Nothing had claws. Nothing had a jaw. Nothing was hunting. And, conversely, nothing was fleeing. For a period of 30 million years, the entire ocean was simply filled with these strange, silent, quilted shapes simply existing. For a significant historical fact, the world had absolutely no idea this period of life even existed until 1957. Scientists previously believed that complex life began much later, in the Cambrian period, the age of trilobites. Then, a schoolboy in England named Roger Mason, while climbing in Charnwood Forest, discovered a fossil that looked precisely like a fern pressed into a rock. He showed it to his father, and then to a local geologist. They quickly realized they were looking at something impossible, a complex organism embedded in rocks that were definitively pre-Cambrian. That fossil, Charnia masoni, named after the boy who found it, fundamentally changed our entire understanding of the history of life on Earth. A fascinating detail about their biology is their unique body plan. These creatures weren't just unusual, they were constructed according to a completely different set of biological rules. They were quilted, much like an air mattress, made up of repeating fractal patterns. This particular body plan, characterized by a high surface area and a non-specialized, blob-like form, does not exist in any living creature today. It represents a completely alien architectural design for life. And this leads us to the central, ongoing scholarly debate. Are these enigmatic creatures our ancestors? Was Charnia the great-great-great-grandmother of all animal life as we know it? The evidence, chillingly, points to no. Most scientists now believe that the Ediacaran biota was a grand, failed experiment. This was Life 1.0, a first draft of biological complexity that ultimately led nowhere. They were an evolutionary dead end, a distinct kingdom of alien life forms that were entirely unrelated to us. They were eventually replaced. This peaceful, strange, silent garden of fractal feathers and quilted mattresses persisted for 30 million years, dominating a planet of silent darkness. And then, they vanished. Every last one of them was wiped clean from the fossil record, just as a new, violent, and utterly revolutionary kind of life was poised to take center stage. The timeline now leaps forward. You are now at 541 million years ago. The silent, fractal garden of Ediacara is gone, scarred clean. It's as if a grand, failed experiment has been erased from the planet, and a completely new one is about to begin. You are now witnessing the single, most important evolutionary event in the history of life on Earth. This is the Cambrian explosion, and explosion is truly the only word for it. In a geological instant, a window of perhaps just 20 million years, the entire ocean, from the sunlit shallows to the crushing deep, erupts with a dazzling array of new life forms. But this isn't the alien, quilted life of the Ediacaran period. This new life is suddenly, shockingly familiar. Look around you. You observe the first hard shells. You see the first jointed legs scurrying across the muddy seafloor. You notice the first delicate antenna tasting the water. And most critically, you see the first complex eyes staring back at you. This is the biological Big Bang. This is the moment when life truly became animal. Every single fundamental body plan, or phylum, that exists today, arthropods, insects, crabs, mollusks, snails, squid, chordates, that's us. All of them appear within this one breathtakingly short window of time. Life had been a single, celled bore for 3 billion years, and then a strange, quilted weirdo for 30 million, and then, fa-bang, it invented everything, all at once. The fundamental question remains why. What ignited this fuse? This continues to be one of the greatest, most profound open scholarly debates in all of science. Was it a change in the atmosphere? Some scientists propose that a sudden, dramatic rise in oxygen levels, perhaps spurred by a massive boom in photosynthesizing algae, finally provided the necessary fuel for high-energy animal bodies. Muscles, nerves, and brains are biologically expensive, and they rely heavily on oxygen. Perhaps the planet simply turned on the power. Or was it a change in the water itself? Other scholars point to a significant shift in ocean chemistry. Perhaps the seas finally became saturated with the right minerals, such as calcium phosphate, enabling creatures to discover the blueprint for creating hard shells and internal skeletons. Or was the trigger for this explosion of life something far more sinister? Was the impetus for this incredible diversification, in fact, the invention of death itself? This is known as the arms race theory. The Ediacaran creatures were passive. They absorbed. They did not actively consume one another. But in the early Cambrian, one creature, somewhere in the deep darkness, evolved a simple, yet revolutionary, adaptation: a mouth and a gut, coupled with the desire to place another creature into it. The moment the first predator was born, the peaceful garden party was abruptly over. A runaway evolutionary cascade was triggered. Life suddenly needed to defend itself. And so came the invention of hard shells, sharp spines, and potent chemical defenses. Life also suddenly needed to move. It could no longer simply sit there and absorb nutrients. It had to flee. It had to chase. And thus, the development of muscles, fins, and legs. And most importantly, life needed to locate its prey. And it desperately needed to perceive its attacker approaching. And so, the single greatest invention of the Cambrian period, the eye. The scientific evidence supporting this arms race theory isn't solely found in the fossils of the animals themselves. It's also embedded in the very mud of the ancient seafloor. For the first time, we observe complex trace fossils. These are not merely the static imprints of the Ediacaran creatures. These are burrows, tunnels, trackways, and distinct hunting trails. The fossil record unequivocally demonstrates that animals were no longer simply sitting passively on the seabed. They were actively moving. They were hiding. They were hunting. The world had, in a geological heartbeat, become an incredibly dangerous place. Our primary historical evidence for this entire new world comes from the Burgess Shale, an extraordinary fossil bed located high in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Discovered in 1909 by Charles Doolittle Walcott, it provides a perfect, breathtaking snapshot of this bizarre new kingdom of life. The fossils are so immaculately preserved in the fine mudstone that you can discern not only shells but also delicate antennae, intricate guts, and even compound eyes, all perfectly visible over 500 million years later. It offered our first stunning glimpse into the sheer, explosive creativity of the Cambrian period and the creatures it revealed. And here's the curious detail: many of these creatures were so utterly strange, so profoundly unlike anything alive today, that paleontologists simply labeled them Problematica. There was Wiwaxia, which resembled an armored, spiky slug covered in scales and long, defensive spears. There was Opabinia, with 5 mushroom stalk eyes and a long, flexible, vacuum cleaner, like nozzle extending from its mouth. And then there was Hallucigenia, a creature so bizarre that scientists literally reconstructed it upside down and backward. They initially believed its defensive spines were legs, and its actual, tiny, claw-like legs were tentacles located on its back. It took decades of further study to correctly orient it, and finally understand its true form. This was the new world, a world of Problematica. a world teeming with spikes and shells and five-eyed monsters. It was a chaotic, dangerous evolutionary free for all. And for a period, it was dominated by one creature. A being so utterly dominant, it was Earth's first true super predator. You are now swimming within that chaotic, 500-million-year-old Cambrian sea. And the seafloor. The seafloor is teeming with activity. It's covered with the most successful and iconic animal of the entire Paleozoic era, the trilobite. These are the bugs of the sea, armored, segmented, and incredibly diverse. They are the new rulers of the seafloor, and they are, quite literally, staring right at you. This isn't an exaggeration. The trilobites possessed, without question, the most advanced eyes on the newly developing planet. This is robust scientific evidence. Their eyes were compound eyes, much like those of a modern fly, composed of hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of individual lenses. But these lenses were not made of soft, squishy protein. The trilobites invented something far more superior. Their lenses were crafted from calcite, a pure, optically perfect rock crystal. They could perceive their world with perfect, 360-degree, crystal-clear vision that was absolutely unparalleled for their time. They could spot predators. They could locate prey. They could even see you. And right now, they are all fleeing. The entire seafloor is scattering in a wave of panic. A vast shadow passes over you. It's not a small creature. It measures 3 feet in length. In a world where most life forms are no larger than your thumb, this is a true titan. This is Anomalocaris, meaning abnormal shrimp. And it is the T-Rex of the Cambrian. This is the super predator that the evolutionary arms race was all about. It's a bizarre, terrifying, and utterly efficient killing machine. It possessed 2 large, stalked eyes, granting it exceptional vision. It moved gracefully through the water, propelled by a series of fleshy fins running along its sides. And at the front, where a head would typically be, it had 2 long, grasping appendages, covered in wicket, backward-facing spikes. Its mouth. It didn't possess a jaw in the way we understand it. Instead, it had a circular wreath of sharp, overlapping plates, shaped like pineapple rings, perfectly designed to crush the hard shells of its favorite food, trilobites. For a significant historical fact, Anomalocaris was such a perplexing creature that it took paleontologists 80 years to accurately identify it. For decades, its fossilized fragments were misidentified as 3 entirely different animals. Its spiked, grasping arms were initially discovered alone and named Anomalocaris. That's the curious detail. The name literally translates to abnormal shrimp, because scientists believed the arm was the complete body of some unusual shrimp-like creature. Its distinctive circular mouth apparatus was found separately and named Toya, mistakenly thought to be a fossilized jellyfish. And its large, finned body was discovered and labeled Largelagania, presumed to be some type of sea cucumber. It wasn't until the 1980s that researchers finally unearthed a complete specimen and realized, to their astonishment, that these 3 supposedly different creatures were all parts of one unbelievable Cambrian, Frankenstein monster. This was the ultimate apex predator of its era, and we have undeniable proof. We've discovered fossilized trilobite shells with clear, W-shaped bite marks, perfectly matching the unique mouthparts of Anomalocaris. So, imagine you're a trilobite. You possess those perfect, crystal eyes, and the T-Rex of your time is actively hunting you. What do? You evolve defenses. Some trilobites develop the ability to roll up into an armored ball, much like a modern-day pill bug. Others evolved vicious, defensive spines to deter attackers, and some simply fled. They escaped the sunlit, shallow seas where the keen-eyed Anomalocaris was hunting them. They retreated deeper, down into the dark, abyssal mud, down into the midnight zone, where the light could not reach. Down where the normal shrimp and its superior vision were rendered utterly useless. And here, In the eternal, crushing darkness of the abyss, something truly incredible and deeply unsettling occurred. These deep, sea trilobite refugees, the direct descendants of creatures with the most advanced eyes on Earth, lost them. Their perfect, crystal lens eyes gradually shrank, generation after generation, until they became nothing more than smooth, blank, featureless armor. They voluntarily became blind. This phenomenon sits at the center of a major scholarly debate. Why? Why would evolution discard one of its greatest ever inventions? The answer, in the brutal, cold efficiency of the deep, is simple. An eye is a liability in total darkness. It's a complex, expensive piece of biological machinery that provides absolutely no useful data when there's no light. It's a high-energy, cost organ that performs no function. It's a waste. So, evolution simply erased them. These trilobites abandoned sight, and in the profound darkness, they re-specialized, using their long antennae to feel and smell their way through the mud, becoming the first great deep sea scavengers. This reveals the first chilling law of the deep. It is a place so extreme, so alien, that it forces life to abandon even its greatest innovations just to survive. The timeline now pushes forward, leaving the Cambrian chaos firmly behind us. You are now drifting into the Devonian period, approximately 400 million years ago. This era is famously known as the Age of Fishes. And indeed, the sunlit shallows are now teeming with a bewildering array of bizarre, armored, jawless fish. The first true sharks are also cruising these waters. But our focus isn't on the fish. We are sinking past them, down towards the seafloor. Down here, the blind trilobites are still scurrying, meticulously feeling their way through the mud, eking out a living as scavengers. They represent the old guard, survivors from a vastly different, bygone era. But above them, a new kingdom has majestically risen. You are now floating through a forest. It's a dense, silent, swaying forest composed of pale, stalk-like trees. Some are only a few feet tall, while others ascend an astonishing 50, 60, or even 70 feet into the water column. And at the apex of each trunk, there isn't a canopy of leaves, but a delicate, feathery flower. Its arms are spread wide, gracefully catching the subtle currents. This is the age of the crinoids. This is the age of filters. We're talking about the sea lilies. And the most crucial thing to understand about them is that they are not plants. They are not lilies in any botanical sense. They are, in fact, animals. They belong to the echinoderm family, the same group that includes starfish and sea urchins. What you're observing is an entire ecosystem built and dominated by these animal flowers. Let's truly visualize this scene. It's an otherworldly meadow. Thousands, perhaps even millions, of these crinoid stems are packed closely together, creating a density akin to a vast field of wheat. Their feathery heads, or calyxes, are all oriented in the same direction, facing the slow, deep ocean current. They are filter feeders, but of a stunningly passive and efficient design. Those delicate, feathery arms you see, called pinnules, are coated in a fine, sticky mucus. They don't actively hunt. They don't move from their spot. They simply stand there, arms gracefully spread, allowing the current to perform all the work, trapping the constant, gentle rain of marine snow and the tiny planktonic organisms that drift past. They are, in essence, living animal spiderwebs, catching a silent blizzard of food. For an astonishing 200 million years, this was the dominant complex life form on the Paleozoic seafloor. They were the seafloor, in much the same way a forest defines the landscape on land. The scientific evidence for their widespread domination is, quite literally, mountainous. If you visit a quarry or a cliff face composed of Paleozoic limestone, look closely. What you are observing is often not merely rock in the geological sense. It is biological in origin. Entire mountains, vast deposits of limestone stretching for hundreds of miles, are formed almost entirely from the fossilized, broken up, and compacted bodies of crinoids. The very sand of the Paleozoic seafloor was often just the crushed scree of their broken stems. For a common historical fact, you have almost certainly held a piece of one without even realizing it. Those small, circular, bead-like fossils, often with a distinct hole in the middle, commonly found on beaches in places like the UK. Those are individual columnals, the tiny vertebral-like segments that made up a crinoid's long stem. In English folklore, they were known as St. Cuthbert's beads, and were sometimes strung together and used as prayer beads. But do not let their passive, plant-like appearance mislead you. This is where a curious detail emerges. We tend to think of them as permanently rooted in one spot. However, some species possessed the ability to move if the current shifted unfavorably, or if they became buried in mud, or if a predator, such as a starfish, approached too closely. Some sea lilies could actually uproot themselves. They would detach their roots, known as a holdfast, and then use their long, feathery arms to slowly crawl along the seafloor like a remarkably slow motion, feathery spider, until they found a more suitable location. Imagine a 60-foot tall flower deciding it didn't like the view and simply walking away. This immense crinoid forest itself is the subject of a fascinating, ongoing scholarly debate. What kind of ecosystem did they actually create? Computer models and detailed analyses of fossil beds suggest that these crinoid meadows were so incredibly dense, so vast in their expanse, that they fundamentally altered the physics of the water currents around them. They acted as a natural baffle, effectively slowing down the bottom currents, which in turn caused even more marine snow to settle out of the water column. This made the meadow an even richer place for them to feed. They were, in essence, engineering their own environment, creating safe, quiet meadows on the seafloor where other, smaller creatures, like those blind trilobites we discussed earlier, could thrive in their protective shade. This was the world, a stable, peaceful, flowery world dominated by filter feeders that reigned over the deep oceans for an incredible 200 million years. They had endured numerous ice ages and smaller, scale extinction events. They seemed eternal, they seemed invincible. And then 252 million years ago, the world ended in fire. You are now floating within those vast crinoid forests of the late Permian period, 252 million years ago. The blind trilobites are still shuffling in the sediment below. The sea lilies are gently swaying in the currents. It is a world that has been remarkably stable for 200 million years. It looks and feels eternal. But you are wrong. The world is beginning to boil. You are about to witness the single greatest catastrophe in the entire history of life on Earth. This is not the extinction event that claimed the dinosaurs. This is an event so profound, so utterly devastating, that it makes the asteroid impact that killed the T-Rex look like a mere bad day at the office. This is the Permian-Triassic extinction. We refer to it as the Great Dying, and it represents the closest life on Earth has ever come to being completely and permanently erased. This was not a quick, merciful asteroid impact from above. This was a slow, agonizing, suffocating death that crept up from the planet itself. It was an apocalypse that unfolded over tens of thousands of years. The scientific evidence regarding the culprit is now almost universally accepted. The murder weapon is a geological formation known as the Siberian Traps. In what is now modern-day Russia, a series of colossal supervolcanoes began to erupt. This wasn't just a single mountain erupting. This was the Earth's crust itself splitting open, a flood basalt event that spewed lava not for a day or a week, but for millennia, covering an area the size of Western Europe in miles of molten rock. But the flowing lava itself wasn't the primary killer. The gases were. This cataclysmic eruption pumped billions upon billions of tons of carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. The planet's climate didn't just change, it fundamentally broke. First came the intense heat. The massive releases of CO2 and methane triggered runaway global warming. The surface of the planet, both land and sea, became lethally hot. Second came the acid. The sulfur dioxide mixed with atmospheric water to create vast quantities of sulfuric acid. It literally rained acid from the sky for thousands of years. The oceans began to acidify, becoming corrosive. The first to succumb were any creatures with shells, the beautiful crinoids, the clams, and the last remnants of the trilobites. Their calcium carbonate bodies simply dissolved away. Third, and perhaps worst of all, came the anoxia. The warm, sun-baked surface water could no longer hold dissolved oxygen. The oceans began to suffocate. Imagine the scene you are now witnessing. The 60-foot tall crinoid forests are no longer swaying gracefully. They are wilting. They are rotting on their stems. The water is transforming into a toxic, choking purple soup as sulfur, eating bacteria, the only organisms capable of surviving these conditions, take over. The ocean is slowly, inexorably, turning into a vast graveyard. The result of this cataclysm is a chilling historical fact: 96% of all marine species on Earth went extinct. Think about that number. It wasn't a mere reset. It was a near total wipeout. On land, 70% of all vertebrate species were eradicated. This is the only mass extinction in Earth's history that is known to have even wiped out insects. That's a curious detail. You have to be a truly exceptional apocalypse to kill off creatures as resilient as cockroaches and ants. But the Great Dying managed it. And the trilobites, those incredible survivors of the Cambrian, the masters of the crystal eye, the blind refugees of the abyss. After 270 million years of unparalleled success, their story tragically ends here. They are gone forever. This leaves us with the most terrifying open scholarly debate in all of paleontology. How did anything possibly survive? How did that remaining 4% of marine life make it through when the entire planet was a scorching, acidic, suffocating trap? Where could one possibly hide? The leading theory suggests that the only survivors were those living in very specific, isolated, lucky pockets, perhaps where a freshwater river met the sea, creating localized conditions that offered a temporary reprieve. Or, crucially, they were the creatures who had already adapted to a world of scarce food and low oxygen. The creatures who had long ago fled the normal world and were already eking out a living in the one place the toxic, warm, acidic surface water couldn't easily reach: the vast, cold, stable, deep abyss. The Great Dying has finally passed. The acid rain has ceased. The supervolcanoes are quiet, and the oceans are slowly, painstakingly beginning to re-oxygenate. The planet is an empty slate, a blank canvas for new life. And you are still in the deep, cold abyss, and it's okay. It wasn't a party, certainly, but it was survivable. The abyss, in its immense depth and stability, acted as the planet's ultimate refuge. The sheer, mind-boggling volume of cold water in the deep ocean served as an enormous buffer. It was simply too vast to heat up quickly, and its existing low, oxygen state meant that the creatures already living there were, by their very nature, adapted to a world on the brink of suffocation. The apocalypse that incinerated the surface clean was, down here, merely a prolonged bad spell. So, who were the survivors? Not the highly specialized, not the big, high-energy predators of the shallows, not the delicate filter, feeding crinoid, flowers. The survivors were the generalists, the scavengers, the creatures that had, as a fundamental lifestyle, always been somewhat hidden from the rest of the world. The ones who could eat almost anything: a bit of marine snow, a bacterial mat, the drifting corpse of a less fortunate creature. This is where the ancestors of our modern, living fossils made their desperate stand. Down here, in the eternal dark, the ancient ancestors of the coelacanth, that Lazarus fish we will encounter much later, were hiding within their deep sea caves. The ancient, primitive ancestors of the frilled shark and the goblin shark were already here in the darkness, eking out a meager living, completely unaware that they had, by default, just inherited the entire ocean. And what became of those vast, 60-foot tall crinoid forests? The ones that so completely defined the Paleozoic seafloor. They are gone, wiped clean from the planet. The shallow water crinoid forests are an extinct ecosystem, but a few species did survive. Which ones? The ones that had already adapted to the deep sea. The refugees. Today, if you go searching for a sea lily, you will not find it flourishing in a vibrant, sunlit reef. You will only find them in the deep, cold abyss. The entire ancient lineage of these animal flowers is still hiding in the deep sea, direct refugees from an apocalypse that concluded 250 million years ago. They never reclaimed the shallows. The trauma was simply too great. The deep became their permanent, generational home. This event, the Great Dying, is a critical historical fact. It represents the great filter of marine life. It completely reset the evolutionary game. The old dynasties, like the trilobites, were utterly finished. The slate was wiped clean. And here's a curious detail. The world after this extinction event was, for a time, profoundly uninteresting. For millions of years, the seafloor was covered in what paleontologists refer to as a disaster fauna. The incredible diversity was gone. Instead, the bottom was simply a carpet of millions upon millions of just one or two species of hardy survivor clams and snails. It was a broken, stagnant, post-apocalyptic world. This situation leads to a deep scholarly debate that continues today. How did the oceans eventually recover? Did the deep sea, that great refuge, reseed the empty shallows? Did these deep sea survivors eventually migrate upwards and evolve into new forms to fill the empty ecological niches? Or did the few, very lucky shallow water survivors, that resilient 4%, find themselves in an empty world and rapidly evolve and diversify to fill the roles of the 96% that had vanished? The answer is likely a combination of both. The Permian period is over. The age of filters and the age of bugs are finished. The evolutionary board is cleared, and a completely new group of animals is about to take over the ocean. They are not fish. They are not sharks. They are land dwellers, reptiles who are now observing the empty, newly healed oceans and making the momentous decision to move back in. The Mesozoic era, the age of reptiles, has officially begun. The Great Dying is finally a thing of the past. You are in the early Triassic period, roughly 240 million years ago. The planet has largely recovered, and the oceans, now eerily empty, represent a vast, open territory, a land of immense opportunity, and the creatures on land have certainly taken notice. A new dynasty is now rising. They are reptiles, perhaps distant relatives of the lizards and crocodiles we know today, who made the extraordinary decision to abandon the land and return to the ocean. It was a stunning act of reverse evolution. These are the ichthyosaurs, literally, fish lizards. And as you observe them, you are witnessing a perfect, textbook example of convergent evolution. These are reptiles. They breathe air. They give birth to live young. But over millions of years, they have evolved to look almost exactly like our modern-day dolphins. They possess the same sleek, torpedo-shaped body. They have the same powerful, crescent-shaped tail fin. They even have a distinct dorsal fin. Evolution, when confronted with the challenge of how to move swiftly and efficiently through water, has, in essence, invented the exact same dolphin blueprint, twice separated by a span of 200 million years. We are now going to swim with the largest of them all. You find yourself in a shallow, warm sea that will one day become the middle of the Nevada desert. A shadow passes over you. A truly immense one. It's the size of a modern school bus, approximately 60 feet long, weighing a colossal 40 tons. This is Shanosaurus. It is the first true colossus of the sea, the largest marine reptile of its time. Its sheer scale is absolutely breathtaking. But as it draws closer, You notice its head. It has a long, pointed snout, but it's remarkably not menacing. This is a key piece of scientific evidence. When we examine the skull of Shonosaurus, we discover that this giant, elongated snout is entirely toothless. This 40-ton monster was not a shark-toothed terror. It was a suction feeder. Much like a modern sperm whale, it's believed that it hunted by swimming into vast schools of squid and simply inhaling them, sucking them down its massive throat. It was a gentle giant, the ocean's very first great whale. Our primary historical fact regarding this creature comes from one of the most remarkable fossil sites on Earth. In the Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park in Nevada, high in the desert mountains, you can find a mass grave containing at least 7 of these gigantic Shonosaurus. They are all buried together, an entire pod of 60-foot giants that all perished at the same time. How did this happen? Why? This is where we encounter a curious detail that borders on a very fringe scholarly debate. For many years, the widely accepted theory was a mass stranding event. The pod, perhaps disoriented, swam into a shallow bay and became beached, much like modern whales sometimes do. Or perhaps they were poisoned by a toxic algal bloom. But in the early 2000s, one researcher examined the fossils and proposed a wild new theory. He claimed that the bones weren't just a jumbled mess. He asserted they were arranged in deliberate, unnatural patterns. He suggested that the Shonosaurus pod had been hunted, killed, and their bones then meticulously arranged on the seafloor by a gigantic, intelligent Triassic kraken, a colossal, unknown octopus that was, in essence, playing with its food. It is almost certainly not true. The patterns are likely just the result of natural water currents and decomposition. But it's a wonderfully creepy story, a modern myth that captures the imagination. The real cause was almost certainly the less cinematic, but equally tragic, mass stranding. The ichthyosaurs, these new fish lizards, were the first reptiles to successfully reconquer the ocean, and they were wildly successful. They were the gentle giants of their era. But they were not the only reptiles to make this return. Another distinct group was also arriving. Another lineage of land-dwelling lizards was slowly creeping back into the water, and they were decidedly not gentle. You are no longer in the Triassic period. The timeline has advanced to the Jurassic period, approximately 160 million years ago. You are in the warm, shallow seas that will one day become the continent of Europe. The ichthyosaurs, the fish lizards, are still present, but they are no longer the sole reptilian players in the oceanic game. You now observe a shape in the water that is instantly, almost mythically, recognizable. This is the very archetype of the Loch Ness Monster. This is Plesiosaurus. It possesses a bizarre, almost comical body design. It has a huge barrel-shaped body, reminiscent of a giant sea turtle. It's equipped with 4 massive, powerful flippers, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And then there's the neck. It is a ridiculously, almost impossibly long serpentine neck. At the end of this elongated neck is a tiny, disproportionately small head, filled with numerous small, sharp, needle-like teeth. Your first and most logical question upon seeing this creature is, why? What on earth is such an extraordinary neck for? For a significant historical fact, this creature holds a special place in the annals of science. The first complete plesiosaur fossil was unearthed by the legendary fossil hunter Mary Anning in Lyme Regis, England, in 1823. It was one of the very first fossil reptiles ever named and properly described by scientists. It was so impossibly strange that the leading anatomist of the day, Georges Cuvier, initially declared it a hoax. The very existence of this sea dragon became one of the key pieces of evidence that forced a skeptical scientific world to accept the radical, and at the time terrifying, new concept of extinction. But that central question, the neck problem, has fueled an open scholarly debate for 200 years. The old theory, the one you often see depicted in vintage artwork, was that the neck functioned as a snake, like striking weapon. The plesiosaur would purportedly coil its long neck and then lunge it forward like a cobra to snatch fish from the water. It's a very dramatic, very visually appealing image, but it is almost certainly completely inaccurate. This is where modern scientific evidence comes into play. In recent years, researchers have utilized sophisticated computer simulations and biomechanical models to actually test the neck's flexibility. The fossil record clearly shows that the vertebrae, while numerous, were not actually all that flexible. The neck was quite stiff. It could bend in long, graceful curves, but it absolutely could not coil up or strike out with snake-like speed. Attempting to do so would have fractured its own spine. So, we return to square one. If it wasn't a spear, what was its purpose? The newer, and arguably much creepier, theory is that the neck was primarily a tool for stealth. Consider this scenario: you're a small, skittish fish in a large school. You are instinctively programmed to flee from any large, scary shape that approaches. If a giant 20-foot-long barrel-chested reptile were swimming directly towards you, you'd be gone in a flash. But what if the first thing to enter your field of vision wasn't the giant, terrifying body? What if it was just a tiny, seemingly non-threatening, 1-foot-long head that simply appears in the middle of your school? By the time you realize that tiny head is attached to a monstrous body 30 feet away, its needle-like teeth are already closing around you. The plesiosaur wasn't a violent striker. It was a patient stalker. It would cruise slowly, perhaps from below, using that absurdly long neck to subtly sneak its tiny, harmless-looking head into a school of fish long before its massive, terrifying body ever arrived. It was hunting by deception. And as for how it actually moved through the water, that's a curious detail. It essentially flew underwater. Biomechanical models of its 4 powerful flippers demonstrate that it used a powerful figure 8 flapping motion, precisely like a modern sea turtle or a penguin. It possessed an all-wheel drive system of underwater flight, an incredibly powerful and efficient method of propulsion. It's a system so effective that evolution has reinvented it at least 3 separate times across different lineages. The plesiosaurs, with their stealthy necks and 4-flipper drive, were incredibly successful. They spread across the globe, inhabiting various marine environments. But they were not the apex predators of their time. They were, in fact, prey. They were actively hunted by their own much scarier cousins. You are still in that same Jurassic Sea 160 million years ago. But the atmosphere has noticeably shifted. The plesiosaurs, those long-necked stealth hunters, are now visibly nervous. They are actively scanning the gloom around them. No longer the confident stalkers, they are now wary prey. The water feels heavy, charged with a new tension. A massive shape emerges from that gloom. It's not another ichthyosaur, and it is most certainly not another plesiosaur of the long-necked variety. This is a pliosaur. This is the other half of the family, the dark twin, the evolutionary path that essentially asked, what if we took that long, stealthy neck and simply got rid of it? This is the short-necked, massive-headed version. This is the lineage that traded subtle stealth for brute, overwhelming force. And you are now looking at the undisputed king of this lineage. You are looking at the apex predator of the entire Jurassic Ocean, Plesiosaurus funki. You might also know it by its media nickname, Predator X. First discovered in Svalbard, Norway, a high, Arctic archipelago, this creature was an absolute monster of the cold, northern seas. It measured a staggering 40 to 50 feet in length, a true titan of the deep. But its body isn't the most terrifying aspect. Its head is. Its skull alone was over 6 feet long. A skull the size of a grown man. And that massive skull was attached to a neck composed of pure, bundled muscle. And that skull was filled with teeth the size of bananas. thick, conical bone, crushing teeth. This was not a stealth hunter. This was a demolition hunter. The scientific evidence unequivocally supports this. When paleontologists modeled the jaw mechanics of Pliosaurus, the numbers they derived were absolutely staggering. The estimated bite force of this creature was 4 times that of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Let that incredible fact truly sink in. This was an animal that could bite with 4 times the power of the most famous land predator in history. It possessed, pound for pound, one of the most powerful and devastating bites in the entire history of life on this planet. This was the shark eater. This was the ichthyosaur eater. And yes, this was the plesiosaur eater. This is not mere speculation. This is a well-established historical fact. We have discovered plesiosaur bones, the fossilized vertebrae of those long, necked stalkers with clear pliosaur bite marks gouged deeply into them. They were actively hunting, killing, and consuming their own long-necked cousins. Predator X was, quite literally, a cannibal within its own extended family. Here's a curious detail about their reign. Pliosaurs were so dominant, so brutally efficient, that their rise directly correlates with the decline of the ichthyosaurs. Those dolphin-like fish lizards that had ruled the Triassic began to fade, their numbers dwindling significantly. It's highly probable that they were simply competed and hunted to extinction by this new, faster, and far more brutal dynasty of short-necked, giant-headed killers. Their remarkable success in the cold, dark northern waters of places like Svalbard has ignited a major open scholarly debate were they warm-blooded. A 50-foot-long, 40-ton predator moving with enough speed and power to chase down other large marine reptiles simply cannot function effectively in near, freezing Arctic water if it's cold-blooded like a modern lizard. The physics simply don't allow it. Many scientists now firmly believe that pliosaurs, much like the ichthyosaurs before them, must have possessed an elevated metabolism. They must have been endothermic, a reptilian version of warm-bloodedness, actively burning calories to generate their own internal body heat, thereby keeping their powerful muscles firing efficiently in the frigid, dark water. The pliosaurs, those undisputed kings of the bite, dominated the Jurassic period. But in the subsequent period, the Cretaceous, a new and even more formidable monster would arrive, a creature that wasn't a fish lizard or a turtle body. It was simply a lizard. The timeline shifts once more. You are now in the late Cretaceous period, approximately 70 million years ago. You are floating in a vast, shallow, tropical sea that has completely split the continent of North America in two. This is the Western Interior Seaway. It was a channel of water hundreds of miles wide, stretching all the way from the Arctic Ocean down to the Gulf of Mexico. The pliosaurs, that giant-headed Predator X dynasty, are gone. The ichthyosaurs, the dolphin lizards, are long gone. There is a new king, a new apex predator, and it is not a fish lizard. It is not a four-flipper, drive plesiosaur. It's a lizard. Meet Mosasaurus. This is what you get if you take a 60-foot-long Komodo dragon, stretch it out considerably, replace its legs with 4 powerful flippers, and then equip it with a massive, shark-like tail fin for propulsion. It is, quite simply, a gigantic aquatic monitor lizard, and it was the T-Rex of the deep. In these final, exhilarating days of the Cretaceous, Mosasaurus was the undisputed apex predator of the entire planet. It represented the final, and arguably most brutal, word in the 150 million year long arms race of the marine reptiles. The scientific evidence for its absolute reign is quite straightforward. We examine its stomach contents. Fossilized Mosasaurus stomach contents have been discovered containing, well, practically everything. We've found them with the remains of giant fish, sharks, seabirds, plesiosaurs, and even other, smaller mosasaurs. If it moved, if it swam, if it flew too close to the surface, it was considered food. And it possessed a horrifying secret weapon to ensure that food remained food. It had a second set of teeth, located deep in its throat, on the very roof of its mouth. It had a pharyngeal jaw, an extra smaller, backward-pointing set of teeth, much like a modern moray eel. When it seized its prey, this second, alien jaw would ratchet forward, firmly grasp the struggling victim, and then pull it, inch by agonizing inch, down its throat. There was no escape. Once you were caught within its primary mouth, the throat itself would simply swallow you whole. For a significant historical fact, the Mosasaurus was one of the creatures that helped invent the entire concept of paleontology. The first major fossil was discovered in a limestone quarry in Maastricht, in the Netherlands, back in the 1760s. This Maastricht lizard was a skull so enormous, so utterly bizarre, so unlike anything alive at the time, was it a whale, a crocodile, a mythical dragon, that it became a key piece of evidence for naturalists like Georges Cuvier to argue for the radical, world-changing, and at the time heretical, idea of extinction. Here's a curious detail for all its terror. Mosasaurus was probably not a deep diver. It was most likely a surface dweller. Its massive, powerful body was probably built for explosive speed within the upper 100 feet of the water column. It probably hunted in a manner very similar to a modern-day saltwater crocodile, but on a colossal scale, cruising just beneath the surface, its keen eyes scanning above, patiently waiting for a seabird to land or a young plesiosaur to surface for air, and then exploding upwards in a shower of teeth and water. However, precisely how it hunted is the subject of a major scholarly debate. For decades, we believed its long, reptilian tail indicated it was a burst predator, much like that crocodile, capable of short, fast, terrifying lunges. But then, new fossils were discovered. Fossils that included skin impressions. We found that Mosasaurus, at least in its later forms, had evolved a perfect, crescent-shaped shark's tail. This discovery has fundamentally changed everything. A shark's tail is not designed for short bursts. It's built for cruising. It's designed for fast, relentless, efficient, long-distance pursuit. So, was it primarily an ambush predator? Or was it a relentless cruising predator? The shark, lizard king of the open ocean. The scientific jury is still out on that particular question. These were the true monsters of the sunlit zone, the undisputed kings of the shallow seas. Their entire reign, from the dolphin, like ichthyosaurs, to the powerful pliosaurs and the terrifying mosasaurs, was built upon a food web that originated and thrived in the light. Now, we are going to leave them behind. We are going to sink beneath them. We'll return to the twilight zone to discover the EV's other reptiles. The ones who were evolving in the dark. The ones with the extraordinary eyes. We are now back in the Jurassic period. High above us, in that sun-drenched, chaotic surface layer, Plesiosaurus, the monstrous Predator X, reigns supreme with its bite force 4 times that of a T-Rex. It is a world of brutal, overwhelming force. The sunlit zone is a loud, bloody battlefield. But we are leaving that world behind. We are sinking. You drop past 200 meters, crossing the thermocline into the profound cold. You are sinking past 300 meters, descending into the deep, permanent twilight. You are now truly within the mesopelagic zone. The fierce battle taking place above is now a distant, muffled echo. Down here, a completely different kind of war is being waged. It's not a war of brute force. It's a war of perception, a war of light itself. This is the eye war. And the main combatant is just now swimming past you. You observe a torpedo-like shape. It's an ichthyosaur, but it's not the gentle, bus-sized Shonisaurus from the Triassic. This is Ophthalmosaurus, the eye lizard. It's roughly the size of a modern dolphin, perfectly built for speed and agility. But you barely notice its body. You can't. You are utterly transfixed by its eyes. They are, relative to its body size, the largest eyes of any animal that has ever lived. Period. They measure a staggering 9 inches across. They are the size of dinner plates. They are larger than basketballs. If your eyes were proportionally this large, they would take up most of your face. They are so enormous that they almost meet in the middle of its skull. And the fundamental question is why? Why would evolution create an eye so comically, so monstrously large? Because it wasn't utilizing them in the brightly lit sunlit zone. Ophthalmosaurus was a true citizen of the Twilight Zone. It was a dedicated deep diver. This entire animal was a biological torpedo, meticulously designed to accomplish one primary task: to hunt in the profound darkness. Its massive, plate-sized eyes were, in essence, light cannons, specifically evolved to capture every last, fugitive photon of light in the dim, blue, black water. We know it was a deep diver. This is robust scientific evidence. Its eyes were so large, and the pressure it encountered during its dives so immense, that the eyeball itself was in constant peril of collapsing, of being crushed flat by the overwhelming weight of the ocean. To prevent this catastrophic failure, it evolved a unique feature called a sclerotic ring. This was a thin, delicate circle of overlapping bones, a feature you can still observe in modern birds, embedded within the eyeball itself. It functioned as a built-in skeletal scaffolding, specifically designed to reinforce the eye and maintain its shape against the crushing pressure of the deep sea and the depths it managed to reach. This is a significant historical fact. Based on its bone structure and overall body mass, we estimate that Ophthalmosaurus could easily hold its breath for over 20 minutes. This incredible capacity allowed it to dive to depths of 3,000 feet, well over half a mile, plunging from the sunlit zone, through the twilight zone, and deep into the midnight zone, all on a single breath. What was it hunting down there in that cold, pitch-black void? It was pursuing creatures that the surface predators couldn't even perceive. It was hunting bioluminescent squid. While Pliosaurus was tearing apart plesiosaurs in the daylight, Ophthalmosaurus existed in a completely different realm, silently feeding on living lanterns, utilizing its giant eyes to pinpoint the faint, chemical glimmers of squid in a world of absolute darkness. For a fascinating detail, just how sensitive were these enormous eyes? It's estimated that their light-gathering ability was so profound that Ophthalmosaurus may have been able to discern the faint, ghostly silhouette of a squid or its subtle bioluminescent flash from a distance of 100 yards, even in near total darkness. It was, essentially, a living, breathing, deep-sea telescope. This particular lifestyle, however, is the core of a major ongoing scholarly debate. When did it hunt? Was it a diurnal diver, spending its days plunging deep into the dark to hunt, and then resting at the surface at night? Or was it a nocturnal hunter? Did it wait for the deep scattering layer, that vast, migrating mass of life, to ascend at dusk, and then use its massive eyes to pick off creatures in the darkness of the nighttime sunlit zone? We still don't know its precise hunting pattern, but what is certain is that it was a master of the dark. It wasn't the only reptile, though, that was evolving to perceive its surroundings in the deep. Other lineages were adapting in even stranger ways. The timeline continues to advance. We are now in the early Cretaceous period, approximately 130 million years ago. You're floating in the deep, cold waters above what will one day become Russia. You spot a familiar, almost comforting shape in the profound darkness. It's a plesiosaur. You instantly recognize the fundamental archetype: the barrel-shaped body, the 4 powerful flippers, and the long, serpentine neck, capped with a small, toothy head. But it's behaving strangely. It's not actively flying through the water with its 4 flippers. It's not stalking, its head snaking forward to ambush a school of fish. It's simply hanging there, motionless. And then it begins to sink. It's not swimming downwards. It's not struggling against any resistance. It's just falling effortlessly. like a pale, reptilian stone, it is descending into the blackness. Its flippers are held perfectly motionless at its sides, its long neck pointed directly down into the void. You are observing a creature that represents the complete antithesis of everything you would expect. You are watching S. abyssosaurus, the bottomless lizard. Its very name tells its extraordinary story. This was a plesiosaur that looked at the crowded, chaotic, monster-filled surface world and simply opted out. It left. While almost every other marine reptile, from the dolphin, like ichthyosaurs to its own pliosaur cousins, was evolving lightweight, hollow, or spongy bones to enhance their buoyancy, to make swimming and floating easier, Abyssosaurus went in the exact opposite direction. It evolved bones that were incredibly heavy. This is solid scientific evidence. When we examine the fossilized bones of Abyssosaurus, we observe an extreme case of pachyostosis. This is a condition where bones become incredibly dense, thick, and heavy. There are no air pockets within them. The internal structure is solid, almost like ivory. This creature, a 20-foot-long reptile, possessed a skeleton made of pure ballast. It was negatively buoyant. It was designed to sink. This revolutionary adaptation meant it didn't need to swim downwards, it simply fell. This fundamentally alters the entire energy equation. A creature like Ophthalmosaurus had to actively, energetically, and powerfully propel itself down to 3,000 feet, fighting its own natural buoyancy every inch of the way. It was an exhaustive 20-minute commute. Abyssosaurus merely exhaled. Imagine it at the surface. It would breach the water, its massive, barrel-sized lungs filling with air. For a few moments, those lungs would act as giant internal floaties, keeping it suspended on the surface. It would rest, it would breathe, and then, when it was ready to hunt, it would simply exhale. With its internal floaties emptied, its heavy, ballast-filled skeleton would take over, and it would simply drop. It would fall like a diver wearing a lead, weighted belt, sinking in a controlled, perfectly vertical, and virtually zero energy descent. It could fall for thousands of feet, conserving all its precious oxygen, saving every last calorie for the actual hunt in the midnight zone far below. This is a key historical fact. It's a classic, beautiful example of niche partitioning. The surface world of the Cretaceous was a red ocean of intense competition. It was crowded. It was a constant brawl. You had giant pliosaurs, early mosaurs, and massive predatory sharks all vying for the same food sources in the same upper zone. For Abyssosaurus simply opted out. It blue oceaned the problem. It created a completely new ecological niche where there were virtually no competitors. It became the only large reptile that was built, from its very bones, to be a specialist of the deep, dark, quiet realms. It left the brawlers behind and became a ghost of the abyss. And here's a curious detail: it was a plesiosaur, but it was living the life of a sperm whale. Think about it. A modern sperm whale is an air-breathing mammal. It surfaces, takes several deep breaths, and then drops like a stone for an hour, falling thousands of feet into the abyss to hunt squid. Abyssosaurus had evolved the exact same lifestyle 130 million years earlier. It's another striking case of convergent evolution, two completely different animals, a reptile and a mammal, arriving at the identical, bizarre, and brilliant solution to the same fundamental problem: how to effectively hunt squid in the pitch black, half a mile down. But this, of course, leaves us with the great open scholarly debate. Once it arrived down there, in that total, crushing midnight zone darkness, how did it actually locate its prey? It did possess large eyes, similar to of Ophthalmosaurus. So, it was almost certainly looking for the same thing: the faint bioluminescent glimmers of deep sea squid and fish. But some scientists speculate it had a second trick, a much creepier one. Consider that neck. That long, 10-foot, stiff but still maneuverable neck. It wasn't just for sneaking up on prey, as its shallow, water cousins might have done. What if that long neck functioned as an antenna? The theory proposes that the skin of its neck may have been covered in sensory pits, specialized organs that could taste the water for the chemical trails left by squid, or perhaps electroreceptors, like those found in sharks, that could detect the faint bioelectric field generated by a living creature's heartbeat in the dark. Imagine it, Abyssosaurus, at the bottom of its fall, floating motionless 2,000 feet down. It's not just looking, it's listening, it's tasting. It's feeling the dark, sweeping its long neck back and forth like a giant, biological metal detector, patiently waiting for a faint ping. The deep wasn't just a vertical challenge. For some reptiles, it presented a seasonal one. We move now from the deep, diving specialists to the high latitudes. You are near the Arctic Circle, in the cold, dark waters that will one day surround the islands of Svalbard. The time is 145 million years ago. In the Mesozoic era, this region wasn't the frozen, ice-capped pole we know today. It was temperate, perhaps similar to modern-day Alaska or Scandinavia. However, the fundamental laws of planetary tilt are eternal. This region still experienced the polar night months of continuous, 24-hour darkness during the winter. For most reptiles, this would be an absolute deal-breaker. A creature that relies on the sun's warmth and light would have to migrate, or hibernate, or simply perish. But a pliosaur is actively hunting here, in the middle of the long, dark winter. This is Ophthalmosaurus, a not to be confused with its cousin, the deep-diving Ophthalmosaurus. The name literally means Eye of the North, and it is, if anything, even stranger than its deep-diving relatives. It's another pliosaur, but its adaptation to the pervasive darkness is completely different from Abyssosaurus. It wasn't a sinker. Its bones were relatively light. It was an active, cruising hunter. So, how did it see in the months-long polar night? The scientific evidence is clearly visible in its skull. Its eye sockets are enormous, just like those of the other Ophthalmosaurus. But, more importantly, they are not positioned on the sides of its head. They are rotated, pointing almost straight up at the ceiling of the ocean. This creature spent its life staring upwards, towards the sky. It was a silhouette hunter. Imagine its strategy. It would cruise slowly in the deep, dark water, perhaps 200 or 300 feet down, and it would constantly look up. In the dead of the polar winter, the surface wasn't bright, by any means. But compared to the absolute, inky blackness of the deep, it was ever so slightly less dark. There was the faint glimmer of starlight. There was the pale glow of moonlight. There was the ethereal, ghostly shimmer of the aurora borealis. And against that faint, bruised purple sky, anything swimming directly overhead would appear as a perfect black silhouette. A fish, a squid, a smaller marine reptile. Ophthalmosaurus hunted by detecting this subtle difference in light. It would spot that black shadow passing above it. And then, with its powerful flipper drive, it would explode upwards from the darkness, a monster rising from the abyss to snatch its unsuspecting prey from below. The very existence of these Arctic plesiosaurs is a crucial historical fact. Their fossils, discovered preserved in the permafrost of Svalbard, provide definitive proof that these large marine reptiles were not cold-blooded, not like a modern lizard that needs to bask in the sun to warm up. To be this active, to be a powerful, high-energy hunter in water that was just a few degrees above freezing, these creatures must have possessed a high internal metabolism. They must have been generating their own body heat, effectively making them warm-blooded reptiles, keeping their muscles firing efficiently in the frigid, dark water. But here's a curious detail, a specific point that initially baffled paleontologists. Just as the video mentioned, we've found rocks in the stomachs of these creatures. Not just a few pebbles, but a collection of stones called gastroliths, or stomach stones. This discovery has fueled a classic open scholarly debate. Why on earth was this creature swallowing rocks? The older, intuitive theory was for ballast. Much like Abyssosaurus used its heavy bones, perhaps Ophthalmosaurus swallowed rocks to make itself heavier, to help it counteract buoyancy and remain at its preferred deep hunting lair. But a newer, and now more likely, theory suggests something else entirely. What was it primarily eating in the dark? It was probably consuming a large quantity of squid. And squid are generally soft and easy to swallow, with one notable exception: their beaks. Their beaks are made of tough, indigestible chitin, much like a bird's beak. The new theory proposes that these rocks weren't ballast at all. They functioned as a gizzard. Just like a modern chicken or certain dinosaurs swallow pebbles to help grind up tough seeds, Ophthalmosaurus swallowed rocks to sit in its stomach and effectively mash up all those indigestible squid beaks and crustacean shells. It was, in essence, an internal blender made of stone. These reptiles were mastering the dark in all its varied forms. But all of these creatures, the lizard, the sinker, the ski stalker, were primarily big game hunters. One particular family of reptiles, however, decided to go small. You are now in the late Cretaceous period, approximately 70 million years ago, in the coastal waters of what will one day become Japan. High above, in the sunlit zone, the daylight world is utterly dominated by the 60-foot Mosasaurus, the T-Rex of the sea. It is a world governed by overwhelming, brutal force. In such a world, it is incredibly dangerous to be small. The brawlers have seemingly won. But the sun is beginning to set. The colossal Mosasaurus, likely a visual, surface-hunting predator, starts to slow down, preparing to rest. The daytime terrors are quieting. And as the world descends into blackness, a new, more specialized hunter emerges. This is Phosphorosaurus, the phosphorus lizard. It's a mosasaur, but a tiny one. At only 12 feet long, it's a minnow compared to its colossal 60-foot cousin. It's not built for speed. It's not powerful. It's not a brawler in the traditional sense. It is a specialist. It possesses a secret weapon. Look closely at its eyes. Like the other deep light hunters, its eyes are remarkably large. But its adaptation is even more specialized. They are not positioned on the sides of its head. They are rotated forward. This is a crucial historical fact. Forward-facing eyes are incredibly rare for a reptile. Most reptiles, both then and now, have eyes positioned on the sides of their heads. This provides them with a wide, panoramic view, which is perfect for an animal that spends its entire life vigilantly watching out for predators. Phosphorosaurus did not possess panoramic vision. It had binocular vision. Its two huge eyes pointed straight ahead, giving it an overlapping field of view, much like yours. This means it had depth perception. The scientific evidence is unambiguous. The very structure of its skull, the specific shape and placement of its massive eye sockets, or orbits, proves that this small reptile was a precision instrument. It could accurately judge distance. This was the underwater owl of the Cretaceous. While its gigantic cousins were sleeping off their day of terrorizing the surface, Phosphorosaurus was just beginning to stir. It would slip quietly into the water, its massive eyes gathering the faintest pinprick glimmers of starlight, and it would begin its hunt. It wasn't chasing down large fish. It was a specialist, meticulously built to hunt the other creatures of the night, the bioluminescent, glowing lanternfish and small, deep water squid that ascended from the deep scattering layer to feed. Its 3D vision allowed it to hang motionless in the black water and precisely judge the exact distance to a small, flickering 2-inch lanternfish. It wasn't a frantic chase. It was a swift, unerringly accurate strike, a single, fast, and precise snap of its specialized jaws. This is a curious detail. This creature was the nerd of the mosasaur family. While its big brothers were the thuggish, heavyweight jocks of the Cretaceous seas, brawling, eating sharks, and even biting each other. Phosphorosaurus was the quiet, nocturnal, highly specialized assassin. It found an ecological niche that no one else could fill: the high-precision, 3D hunter of the night. This, of course, leads us to a fascinating open scholarly debate. Could it perceive color? It's a compelling question. The bioluminescence emitted by its prey, the squid and lanternfish, wasn't white. It was almost exclusively in shades of blue and green. Did the eyes of Phosphorosaurus co-evolve with its prey? Did it, unlike most reptiles, develop specific visual pigments or specialized cone cells in its retina that were extra sensitive to those exact shades of blue and green? It's entirely possible we are looking at a creature that perceived its night world not in stark black and white, but as a series of floating, ghostly blue and green targets against a field of pure, absolute black. These specialized reptiles, the giant-eyed Ophthalmosaurus, the sinking Abyssosaurus, the sky-staring Ophthalmosaurus, and the 3D hunting Phosphorosaurus, were the undisputed masters of the deep, dark Mesozoic oceans. They had conquered the challenges of light, darkness, pressure, and cold. They were at the very peak of their 150 million-year dynasty. And then, 66 million years ago, a 6-mile-wide rock fell out of the sky. You are floating in the ocean 66 million years ago. The world is at its peak. High above, in the sunlit zone, Mosasaurus is king. In the deep, Ophthalmosaurus and its kin are the undisputed masters of the twilight. The reptilian dynasty has ruled the seas, unbroken, for 180 million years. They seem invincible. And then, a 6-mile-wide asteroid, traveling 30 times the speed of a bullet, slams into the planet. It strikes what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This is the K-PG extinction event, the day the age of reptiles unequivocally ended. And you are in the ocean, witnessing it unfold. The event isn't one single catastrophe. It's a cascade of apocalypses, one after another, all within the span of mere hours. First, within minutes, comes the devastating shockwave. The impact is equivalent to a trillion-ton bomb, a magnitude 11 earthquake that rings the entire planet like a bell. It triggers mega tsunamis, not just a single wave, but a moving wall of water miles high that rips outward from the impact site at the speed of a jet. It scores the coastlines of the entire globe. Second, within hours comes the intense heat. The impact is so violent that it vaporizes the asteroid itself and a significant chunk of the Earth's crust, ejecting trillions of tons of molten rock high above the atmosphere. This molten rock spreads across the sky and then re-enters, falling back to Earth as a global, high-speed rain of incandescent glass beads called tektites. This is the scientific evidence for the immense heat pulse. This rain of superheated glass, through friction, warmed the entire atmosphere to thousands of degrees, transforming the planet's sky into a colossal broiler. A planet-sized oven. It is believed that the surface of the ocean literally boiled. Any creature that needed to come to the surface for air, like the mosasaurs, like the plesiosaurs, was instantly cooked alive. Third, for the few creatures that managed to survive that initial inferno, comes the pervasive darkness. The sky is now completely choked with a thick, black cloud of soot, ash, and vaporized rock. This unpacked winter blots out the sun, not for a day or a week, but for years. Photosynthesis ceases entirely. The phytoplankton, that microscopic grass of the sea that forms the very base of everything, dies. The sunlit zone simply perishes. The creatures that ate the phytoplankton also die. The creatures that ate of them die. The entire complex, vibrant food web of the sunlit zone, the intricate web that supported the mosasaurs and the plesiosaurs, collapses completely. It is not a slow decline. It is an instant, systemic failure. This is our mainstream historical fact: the great marine reptiles were starved out of existence. The mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, the Ophthalmosaurus, The Guzzler's Abyssosaurus, all of them gone. The oceans were emptied, but not completely. The asteroid impact and the initial heat pulse could not boil the entire ocean. The subsequent impact winter could not stop the fundamental physics of a sinking corpse. So, who survived? Down in the abyss, 4,000 meters deep, nothing truly changed. The creatures in the midnight zone and the abyss were already living in a world of total, perpetual darkness. They were already adapted to a world of extreme cold. And most importantly, their food web did not depend on the sun. This is the crucial, curious detail: the creatures of the deep were not consuming phytoplankton. They were consuming marine snow. They were consuming detritus. Their entire economy was based on scraps, on the leftovers of a world that had just been utterly annihilated. For them, the rain of marine snow didn't stop. In fact, it actually improved. For the next 100 years, the marine snow became a literal blizzard of ash, soot, and the dead bodies of the entire sunlit zone, all raining down from the toxic, dead world above. For the creatures of the deep, the apocalypse was, in essence, a buffet. This framing of the deep sea as the ultimate refuge is a significant scholarly debate that has gained prominence in recent years. This catastrophic event didn't kill the deep sea inhabitants. It didn't truly challenge them in the same way. It simply allowed them to continue their existing way of life. The creatures that were already weird and specialized and primitive, the ones quietly hiding in the dark, were the only ones left standing. The slate had been wiped clean once again. The great reptiles are gone. The Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, is about to begin. But down in the dark, the real survivors, the ancient living fossils from an age before the T-Rex, are simply carrying on as if nothing extraordinary had ever happened. We are now in the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. High above, in the sunlit zone, a new dynasty is rising. The whales. Mammals have returned to the sea, just as the reptiles did before them, and are rapidly evolving to fill the empty thrones left vacant by the mosasaurs. But we are not in the sunlit zone. We are in the deep. Down here, 2,000 meters deep in the midnight zone, the age of mammals is an irrelevant rumor. Down here, the survivors of the last age are still cruising. A peculiar shape drifts out of the blackness. It's about 10 feet long and profoundly bizarre. It's a pale, sickly pink. Its body appears soft, flabby, almost unformed. It possesses a long, flat blade-like nose that juts out, resembling more of a trowel than a conventional snout. Its eyes are tiny black and bead-like. This is Mitsukurina austoni, the goblin shark. This creature is not a new Cenozoic model. It is a ghost. It is a living fossil, the last surviving member of a family, the Mitsukurinidae, that is an astonishing 125 million years old. This shark, this exact species of shark, was swimming in the deep, dark Cretaceous oceans, while Mosasaurus was ruling the surface. It was here, floating in the dark, when the asteroid struck. It felt the shockwave. It feasted on the rain of death that followed. And 66 million years later, it is still here. It has barely changed because its world never truly changed. It is the ultimate low-energy predator. Observe it closely. Its flabby, soft-muscled body is not built for speed. Its small tail is not designed for powerful propulsion. It is not fast. It is not strong. It does not chase its prey. It drifts. Its entire body is a finely tuned waiting machine. But its head is a weapon. It is a biological slingshot. This is compelling scientific evidence. The goblin shark's jaw is not fused to its skull, unlike yours or a T-Rex's. Instead, its entire jaw and gill structure are undocked, held in place by a pair of massive elastic ligaments. It is, essentially, a catapult disconnected from the rest of its face. It drifts motionless through the blackness. Its prey, a deep sea fish or squid, doesn't even perceive it. It doesn't need to. That long, flat, trowel-shaped nose, this is a curious detail, is covered in ampullae of Lorenzini. These are special gel, filled pores that all sharks possess, allowing them to detect the tiny electrical fields generated by a living creature's muscle movements. But the goblin shark's antenna, like nose, is one of the most sophisticated on Earth. It is literally feeling for a heartbeat in the total dark. It senses a fish. It drifts closer. The fish is now just a few inches from its face, and then athwhack. The jaw detaches, the elastic ligaments contract, and the entire jaw structure launches forward, shooting 3 or 4 inches out of its own face. A set of needle-like teeth, previously hidden, extend and snatch the prey. This is slingshot feeding. It is one of the fastest bites in the entire animal kingdom, yet the shark itself barely moves. The prey is snatched. The jaw retracts back into the head, and the shark simply continues drifting. It is the epitome of low-energy ambush predation. For a compelling historical fact, we had absolutely no idea that it performed this incredible feat. For 100 years, we only knew the goblin shark from dead, mangled specimens inadvertently dragged up in fishing nets. We thought its weird, loose jaw was merely a deformity. It wasn't until 2008 that a living specimen was captured, kept in an aquarium in Japan, and filmed. For the very first time, we witnessed this nightmare jaw in action. It was a revelation. This brings us to an open scholarly debate: why is it so ugly? Why the pink, flabby, seemingly degenerate body? The answer is that it's not degenerate at all. It is perfectly adapted to its unique environment. Its pink, watery, low-density muscles are less dense than the surrounding water. This renders the shark neutrally buoyant. It can float motionless at 2,000 meters without sinking, without needing to swim, without expending any effort, for weeks on end just waiting. It is a floating, living, 125 million-year-old ghost, armed with a biological catapult. And it's not the only one. The pink, flabby ghost of the goblin shark drifts back into the blackness, its catapult jaw reset, its 125 million-year-old patrol continuing. You are alone again in the crushing, cold dark, but not for long. Another shape emerges. This one is different. It's not pink and flabby. It's dark, sleek, and exceptionally long. Very long. It looks like an eel. A 6-foot-long, dark, slithering sea serpent, moving with a slow, sinuous, reptilian grace. Its eyes are large, green, and ghostly. It is the stuff of ancient seafaring nightmares. This is Chlamydocelicus anguinus, the frilled shark. And if the goblin shark was a ghost from the Cretaceous, this creature is its even older brother. This shark's lineage is estimated to be at least 80 million years old. This is a crucial historical fact. This creature, this exact biological design, was swimming in the deep, dark oceans when Tyrannosaurus rex was walking on land. It too was here when the asteroid struck. It too experienced the impact winter. And it too just kept going. It is a living, breathing dinosaur, era monster, a true relic from an age of titans. It floats closer, and you notice its mouth. And you quickly realize that this is its defining feature. It possesses 300 teeth, and they are not typical shark teeth. They are not the big, serrated triangles of a great white. They are trident teeth. Every single tooth is a small, sharp, 3-pronged pitchfork, like a tiny Neptune's trident. And these 300 tridents are arranged in 25 neat, backward-facing rows. This mouth is not a weapon for biting or tearing. It is a trap. It is not designed for biting, or chewing, or tearing flesh. It is a biological Velcro wall of needles. Imagine a squid, its primary prey, in the absolute dark. It makes a mistake. The frilled shark moves. Mainstream historical fact. Based on its bone structure and body mass, we estimate Ophthalmosaurus could easily hold its breath for over 20 minutes. This incredible capacity allowed it to dive to 3,000 feet, well over half a mile, plunging from the bright sunlit zone, through the twilight zone, and deep into the midnight zone on a single breath. What was it hunting down there in that cold, pitch black void? It was hunting the things the surface predators couldn't even perceive. It was hunting bioluminescent squid, while Pliosaurus was tearing apart plesiosaurs in the daylight. Ophthalmosaurus existed in a completely different world, silently sipping on living lanterns, using its giant eyes to spot the faint chemical glimmers of squid in a realm of total darkness. For a curious detail, just how sensitive were these eyes? It's estimated that its light-gathering ability was so profound, it may have been able to detect the faint, ghostly silhouette of a squid or its subtle bioluminescent flash from over 100 yards away in near total darkness. It was, in essence, a living, breathing deep sea telescope. This particular lifestyle, however, is at the center of a major open scholarly debate. When precisely did it hunt? Was it a diurnal diver, spending its days plunging deep into the dark to hunt, and then resting at the surface at night? Or was it a nocturnal hunter? Did it wait for the deep scattering layer, that vast migrating mass of life, to rise at dusk, and then use its massive eyes to pick off unsuspecting creatures in the relative darkness of the nighttime, sunlit zone? We still don't know its precise hunting pattern, but what is clear is that it was an absolute master of the dark. It wasn't the only reptile, however, that was evolving incredible ways to see in the deep. Others were adapting in even stranger ways. The timeline continues to move forward. We are in the early Cretaceous period, roughly 130 million years ago. You're floating in the deep, cold waters over what will one day be parts of Russia. You spot a familiar, almost comforting shape in the profound dark. It's a plesiosaur. You recognize the archetype instantly: the barrel-shaped body, the four powerful flippers, and the long, serpentine neck capped with a small, toothy head. But it's behaving rather strangely. It's not actively flying through the water with its four flippers. It's not stalking, its head subtly snaking forward to ambush a school of fish. It's just hanging there, motionless. And then it begins to sink. It's not swimming downwards. It's not struggling against buoyancy. It's simply falling effortlessly. Like a pale, reptilian stone, it descends into the blackness. Its flippers held motionless at its sides, its long neck pointed straight down into the void. You are witnessing a creature that is the antithesis of everything you would expect. You are watching Abyssosaurus, the bottomless lizard. Its very name tells you its remarkable story. This was a plesiosaur that observed the crowded, chaotic, monster-filled surface world and simply opted out. It left. While almost every other marine reptile, from the dolphin, like ichthyosaurs, to its own pliosaur cousins, was evolving lightweight, hollow, or spongy bones to enhance their buoyancy, to make swimming and floating easier, Abyssosaurus went in the exact opposite direction. It evolved bones that were incredibly heavy. This is crucial scientific evidence. When we examine the fossilized bones of Abyssosaurus, we observe an extreme case of pachyostosis. This is a condition where the bones become incredibly dense, thick, and heavy. There are no air pockets within them. The internal structure is solid, almost like ivory. This creature, a 20-foot-long reptile, possessed a skeleton made entirely of ballast. It was negatively buoyant. It was designed to sink. This revolutionary adaptation meant it didn't have to swim down, it simply fell. This fundamentally alters the entire energy equation. A creature like Ophthalmosaurus had to actively, energetically, and powerfully swim its way down to 3,000 feet, constantly fighting its own natural buoyancy every inch of the descent. It was an exhaustive 20-minute commute. Abyssosaurus merely exhaled. Imagine it at the surface. It would breach, its massive, barrel-sized lungs filling with air. For a few moments, those lungs would act as giant internal floaties, holding it on the surface. It would rest. It would breathe. And then, when it was ready to hunt, it would exhale. With its floaties emptied, its heavy, ballast-filled skeleton would take over, and it would simply drop. It would fall like a diver wearing a lead, weighted belt, sinking in a controlled, perfectly vertical, and zero energy descent. It could fall for thousands of feet, conserving all its precious oxygen, saving every last calorie for the actual hunt in the midnight zone below. This is a classic, beautiful example of niche partitioning, a mainstream historical fact in evolutionary biology. The surface world of the Cretaceous was a red ocean of intense competition. It was crowded. It was a constant brawl. You had giant pliosaurs, early mosasaurs, and massive predatory sharks all vying for the same food sources in the same areas. Abyssosaurus simply opted out. It blue oceaned. The problem, creating a completely new ecological niche where there were virtually no competitors. It became the only large reptile that was built, from the bones up, to be a specialist of the deep, dark, and quiet. It left the brawlers behind and became a ghost of the abyss. And here's the curious detail: it was a plesiosaur, but it lived the life of a sperm whale. Think about it. A modern sperm whale is an air-breathing mammal. It surfaces, takes a deep breath, and then drops like a stone for an hour, falling thousands of feet into the abyss to hunt squid. A Abyssosaurus had evolved the exact same lifestyle 130 million years earlier. It's another remarkable case of convergent evolution, two completely different animals, a reptile and a mammal, arriving at the identical, bizarre, and brilliant solution.